Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train a Dragon podcast. I'm your host, HC, and with me are.
Rush 2112.
And Wolf.
And we have a returning guest. Introduce yourself again.
Hello, everyone. I am King of the Wilderness, or I am Haddock, as you might have heard me call myself before.
Welcome back. Good to have you here again, as always. And we have you here with us because you wrote a really great blog, a really interesting one, if I may comment on that, about Drago in the Hidden World. And you posted it around the same time as certain interview with Dean showed up saying that Drago was probably cut from the third movie. So I said, why not? Let's talk about this, because that's what we do. We theorize, we make a few guesses, and sometimes we're right, because we're apparently right about Drago drowning at the end of How to Train Dragon 2.
You forgot my favorite word. We predict.
Yeah. You weren't in that episode, so it's Wolf
Ouch.
and mine's badge of honor. that apparently Drago is not in the third movie, and he drowned and screamed underwater until, yeah.
I mean, there's still a chance for you guys to be wrong, so be careful about claiming your victories.
Well, you know, sometimes a short-lived victory is a victory nonetheless. Sometimes.
When you lose as much as HC does, even the smallest victory is a victory.
Well,
Even if
This-
you don't end up being right, lots of predictions are always fun to see the contrast between what you envisioned and what the story ends up becoming. So for me, a lose is just as fun as well, because if it means I'm wrong, then I'm surprised, and the story can be very fun when it surprises me.
yeah. Or you could be the people who think, "Hey, this is not what I predicted. Now it's a fan fiction." But you know, that's
Oh, God.
Oh, No, we always have to go into something without a firmly set expectation, in the sense that if it's not what you expected, you're not going to be disappointed. Because I've seen a lot of people go into stories with such huge expectations for what it has to be like, that if it's anything different than what they predicted, they're going to be angry at it. And that's not a healthy way to approach any sort of story. Predictions, great, they're so much fun, but you can't go in saying, it's this or I'm leaving. It's this or
Agreed.
yeah.
Wasn't this the problem with The Last Jedi, pretty much?
It's a problem with almost anything that comes out anymore, I feel like.
Yeah,
that-
but
sequel.
something felt big with this specific one. That, you know, it tried to evolve I haven't seen the movie myself yet, but I've heard that was the main problem was try to actually evolve the universe and do something with it, and the fans were like, "No, how dare you!"
You do tend to see that becoming more of a problem with stuff that is more that has a already established grounding that fans expect to see from it, and when you deviate from that, even if fans want to see something new, right? And you'll probably hear many fans say they want to see something new. They also don't want to see something new. So.
See, what they wanted was something between a complete carbon copy, a la The Force Awakens, and something completely different, a la The Last Jedi. It was too new versus too familiar.
There's a gray area somewhere in the middle, and that's where
You'll never find it.
Yeah, you have to be exactly that, or the movie sucks.
And you'll never find it.
What if I'm a bit of this shade of gray? Nope.
There are 50 Shades of Grey, and you have to be one of them.
I try to avoid that joke. Now you put this movie back in my head. All this. Anyway, let's talk about Drago. Yeah, that's the biggest mood switch ever from 50 Shades of Grey. Drago. All of this screaming starting to make sense. Anyway, my range jokes aside.
50 Shades of Drago.
No. Do not Photoshop this, please.
The screaming.
But I will take a dramatic reading though. That would be awesome.
you find his taste. What does he say? It's like in the trailer of the movie or something like that. It's like Drago saying that, and he just starts screaming at her.
Okay. Let's keep this for the after show anyway. So, first order of business. Dean did say that the plan was for Drago to reform by the end of the Hidden World, before he was told to cut him off the story. So, how do you think his arc would have played out if this were to happen? Haddock, you're the guest.
All right, so I'm not sure exactly how it would have concluded, but I do have a garner about the topic that they might have addressed in a reformation for Drago. So I think it's based upon the fact that Drago talks about his past and how to train your dragon too. I know what it is to live in fear, to see my village burned, my family taken. But even as a boy left with nothing, I vowed to rise above the fear of dragons and liberate the people of this world. That's Drago's internal conflict right there. So that's what you're going to need to resolve in order to finish any arc of his.
Okay.
And, yeah, so, and especially since Drago and Hiccup parallel each other in many respects, there could be a way to reunite the two, I guess. They both know what it's like to live in fear of having their village burned, their family lost to dragons, people's lives in large part being dictated from dragon aggressions. So, that could be an angle by which to have a bit of reform for Dragon by the end of the story. Though, I don't know, there's something nice about not having villains get their mind changed too. But that's just my opinion, the last part.
Yeah. Okay. Who wants to go next?
I guess I'll go. So,
Hard act to follow.
yeah, right. I will say that Haddock brought up the exact speech that led me to one of my predictions. How, just a minor prediction that if Drago was in there, and these are all predictions of if Drago is in the movie, that the one that finally caused him to turn over the edge was not the dragon raid, but it was Grimmel raiding, or trying to attack dragons, and they were just collateral damage, but he thought it was dragons, so who knows. I know, one of my weaker ones, but you brought up the point early. Anyway, so how would Drago have played into the story? Once again, Haddock overanalyzes the most amazing things and makes us look horrible. Brings up the great point that I have seen on his blog about how Drago mirrors Hiccup. You even go down to the right arm instead of the left leg that is gone. So how would it play? I think that Drago would continue to be a foil, and he wouldn't change, but he would probably be... He'd probably be with Hiccup. So, let's forget the books for a second. He would be the first person that Hiccup needed to kill. It would have... I think that would have been a true turning point for Hiccup. If he had to kill somebody, forgetting the graphic novels, because if you don't read the graphic novels, then you don't know that Hiccup has, killed somebody before through proxy, I should say. But
yeah,
I think it would be good if Drago is some people you can't change, and Hiccup learned that, but he still was like, oh, Drago's alive, maybe I can get to him again. But in the end, he can't, so he does have to actually do it, not just say, hey, he fell off the edge of a cliff into water. I think he's still...
And I assume he
might
can
do it.
swim.
Yeah, right? With one arm. Very possible.
Well, if he's on a dragon, he doesn't have to swim so much as hold on.
Okay, now that's a
Hold
little
on
harder
to
with
the
one
dragon
arm.
and his breaths. That's a lot of things.
But yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay. Wolf, do you want me to go first, or do you have something?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, here's the way I see it. Basically, I may be jumping the gun a bit here, but so I'll try and keep it a bit vague. Basically, we all have to remember that, like Haddock said, Drago's main motivation in the second movie is to pretty much rise above the fear of dragons and get the dragons to obey him, which is why he needs the alpha. That's the main idea. But then Hiccup and Toothless beat him and his alpha, and now Toothless is the alpha. So what's the next logical step? Get Toothless, the new alpha, and now he also has a personal vendetta against Hiccup because of everything he's done to him. So that's his motivation as a villain. But we are going over. We went over how this is supposed to be like how he's supposed to be reformed by the end of it all. Well, what if he just, and this is a franchise that's pretty much based himself about villains being good and starting to respect Hiccup by the end of it. Maybe he just finds out that Hiccup does have a point and he starts respecting him. Because Hiccup lost his father thanks to a dragon, which, Drago kind of helped accomplish, I'm not saying, but, they managed to get past that. They managed to look to put that aside and still come out victorious. So maybe he just learned. So if they had to do it, this is how I see they would have done it. And sorry for the coffee. I'm recovering from small sickness. Sorry about that. That's it.
And there is something appealing to the idea of that, because How to Train Your Dragon, even if you're looking at, well, especially the book series, there is a very big hopeful idealism throughout the story. Is even when the characters are tackling some very grim topics, there is always some sort of forward sense of people can change, or we can unite with people, that's embedded throughout the stories in there. So your idea sort of brings it in a lot more than I've seen a lot of other people making predictions with Drago. For instance, I've seen people make predictions about Drago's Bewilderbeast actually turning against him in the movie 3, and Bewilderbeast being his downfall or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you. That's awesome to hear. And if I may add one thing, I think the best thing that everyone ever said that will happen with Drago is the comic Leffy did and Rush did dubbing for a year ago. That was that's great. So Wolf, no escape.
Looking back at what you just said a minute ago, HC, though, didn't we in the past talk about how, if I'm not mistaken, it was in reference to the third movie, we talked about how I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It was something about taking a very cynical approach, a very cynical look at the second movie, and its message being something along the lines of not actually trusting people and taking a very cynical look at the world and stuff of that nature. And I think, bringing that up, I think that was episode 13.
That was maybe? Really, I think it was
long,
really.
It was talking about the How to Train Your Dragon 3 log line, if I'm not mistaken. Is where
I think a bit after the DreamWorks buyout. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, I did say that.
It goes well. It goes along well with that. I think that they would take that cynical approach to the second, that somewhat more cynical approach to the second movie, and then change that around for the third. It'd be an interesting idea, I think, and would go well with it. But as far as predictions go for the third, for what Drago would have gone through in the third movie.
Well, before you say that, I just want to say that I totally planned this connection. This was totally my point. Totally
even
planned.
The small victories, guys. Even the small victories.
He does need them.
Give this man affirmation, somebody.
Okay, but on a serious note, though, coincidence, go ahead.
I guess my prediction used to be, like, before we got all the information we have now, my prediction was that I don't think Dean ever said he would reform Drago. in the third movie, that we would see more of his past and we would learn more about him. He would become a more sympathetic villain potentially, but he never did come out right and say that he would reform, if I'm not mistaken. You have to correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're right.
Mhm.
That's all
Yeah,
that
he did say that, when I say reform, I'm referring to the video that just came out, to the interview that was
yeah.
posted a week ago.
Yeah.
With that being the case, my prediction always was that he was going to more than likely be killed in the third movie. They would end him off because he wouldn't change his mind. He wouldn't come over and believe what Hiccup believed and look at things the same way Hiccup did. But my thought or prediction, I guess you'd say, was that it wouldn't be Hiccup who would kill him. It would have been Toothless who killed him, and it would have been his end. And that was always my prediction for a while.
This could have been interesting because, at the end of the day, it was Drago who gave the command to the Bewilder Beast to give the command to Toothless to shoot at Hiccup. So it could have been interesting if this was like a reverse and Hiccup would have given the order for Toothless to shoot Drago. This could have been nice.
It's not just that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Oh, shoot. And I almost just forgot what I was going to say. Mentally backtracking for a second there. All right, yeah. And I do think that I was of the same mind as you, where I thought that Drago would die. Although I was thinking it was more going to be his own undoing sort of thing. But the reason why I thought that Drago would have to go is otherwise it could sort of erase the entire message of the second movie about the idea that there are unreasonable men that can't be reasoned with. Well, if you are able to reason with him in the third movie, doesn't that take away the entire message of the second film?
And another reason why I always said that it would be Toothless who killed him was, for me, it would kind of lend credence to the dragons and the Vikings parting ways, because it would give Hiccup pause, right? It would make him realize once again that these are still dragons. They are still and can be very dangerous when they want to be or need to be. And it would give him some pause, perhaps, and possibly lend credence to them leaving, maybe.
Thinking about it now, wouldn't it be cool if the entire idea of Drago would have been what would have happened if Hiccup never met Toothless and just grew to hate dragons all the time? Like, this is what he would end up being. I just thought about it.
That's definitely how I think that Drago was set up, because as we've mentioned before earlier, Drago is a foil to Hiccup. So he's the example of somebody who's gone through many of the same circumstances that Hiccup has, especially in childhood. But instead of coming out uniting with dragons, came out of a way as, well, I have to conquer or defeat dragons. So the antagonistic response instead of the more community-oriented response, I guess.
Okay. So we all talked, we all shared our thoughts about this. Let's move on to the second category. So Dean said that in his earliest planning for both How to Train Your Dragon 2 and this in N3, Valka was the villain of the second movie, and Drago would have only been mentioned. And then in the third film, Drago would have made his appearance. Grimmel seems a bit similar to Drago in his plan, as we saw from the trailer. So do you think there's a connection between Drago's original point and what Grimmel ended up being?
Ooh, can I please go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Love the enthusiasm.
All right, so I've got a little bit of thought process here, so stay with me through all of this. I'm going to start with Valka, but I promise I'm getting to Grimmel and Drago at the end.
Okay.
All right. So with Valka, villain Valka, one of my favorite things to think about. What's interesting about her is that we can do a whole lot of tracing back to what How to Train Your Dragon 2 would have been like when she was the villain.
We did an episode about it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And it's so interesting because, for instance, there's the storyboards from Darren Webb, multiple interviews from Dean Deblaw, some test animated footage by Simon Otto, and they all hark back to that villain Vulca material. And, you know, as you guys have seen as well, it fills in the gap of what the story was originally like. But here's the interesting thing for me. When we look at all of these materials together, it's interesting that in the final product, Drago more or less took on Vulca's old role. Not completely, but in a lot of aspects. So when Vulca was villain, she was the one who commanded a bewilderbeast to rise out of the water and fight Jacob and Stoic, saying she's the one who commanded the King of Dragons. It was her bewilderbeast that took control of Toothless's mind, and it was Vulca who attacked Berk at the end of the movie. She had different motivations, like, so she wanted to separate humans and dragons completely, and believing that this would free the dragons of Berk when she attacked, I believe was what the interview said. But a lot of her actions and choices still are very similar to what Drago ended up becoming. So finally, to get to my point, it's the idea that when they cut villain Vulca out of How to Train Your Dragon 2, and they needed someone to fill in the gap, Drago took lots of Vulca's roles. And in that process, it means that bringing Drago in earlier than intended might have left some holes open for what the antagonist would do in the third film. So I think that it's possible that in rearranging our villains in the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, Grimmel has taken on what Drago was originally intended to portray. So yeah, so that's why I was starting with Vulca and going through all this, is it's sort of a series and chain of filling in one hole after another as we change the story aspects. So Drago filled in Vulca's aspects, and now it seems like Grimmel could be filling in what Drago was originally intended on doing. I know that there was an interview with Deblaw back in 2014 even, where he said he was working on tweaking the antagonistic forces, given that he introduced Drago earlier intended. And so I think it's possible that he gave a lot of those motivations and three-dimensionality to Grimmel.
All right. So who's next? Who once again wants to follow up?
See, I had thoughts about this.
Man, that's good. That's what we want, right? I would agree, right? Like, I was going to say more or less something along the same lines, is that generally when you make changes like this, that doesn't mean what was there is just completely thrown out the window, right? Some of it is, but some of it still sticks around and ends up getting changed over to whatever character fills that new spot in, or to whatever is changed. So those changes never quite go away. So it's always, you can always tell kind of how, if you get information like this, how that movie might have been if it was done, because you can look at the movie you did get and say, okay, these are the things that would have stayed the same, and these are probably the things that would have changed.
Hello?
So, yeah, definitely agreed. Hello.
What's up?
Oh, okay. Sorry about this. I hate it when people don't listen when I'm saying that I'm not available for stuff. Okay, but what did I miss?
Everything. We finished the show without you.
Yeah, it's because we figured out exactly what How to Train Your Dragon 3 is going to be about start to end. There's no questions anymore. We just know everything.
Damn it.
You'll have to listen to the episode.
Universe.
We're not gonna go over it again. I mean, why say it more than once?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rush, we understand you're still upset about last week. I
went back and listened, mostly so I could hear how I sounded at the very end.
Okay, to those who have no idea what we were talking about, listen to last week. But in case I missed it, Haddock, you kind of stole a point I wanted to make, but you made it sound way better than I would ever make it. So
a common theme.
Yeah, so great. Anyone started saying something before I disappeared?
I did.
Okay, so you continue.
I'm done.
Oh. Well, apparently I missed that one. Raj, do you have something to say? Or...
I honestly forgot what the question was because of the interruption. I had my mind. What was it again?
Do you think Grimmel's similarity to Drago in his plan as a connection to the fact Drago was supposed to be only in the third movie, and then there was the Intel switch.
Right. So I think that originally that's how it would have happened, but they took elements of Drago, and they also took elements of, I'm gonna say, Vigo too, and then they threw them together because Grimmel, as far as we know, isn't trying to rule anything or do anything. We don't know just yet. He's just trying to hunt all the Night Furies. He's a dragon hunter, but a specific type. So it's not like he's going for all of the other types of dragons. Although we don't know, because his dragon is also a dragon hunter. So it's like, hey, symbiotic relationship for the worse, let's be honest. And so you have that aspect, which is Vigo, the hunting dragons. But then the Drago part is he has a massive army to help him. No. I honestly actually have very little similarities to Drago, other than the fact that he has basically villain tendencies towards Hiccup. You can say that, oh, this is what Drago is supposed to be, and it's very true, so they just shifted everything up as opposed to, mixing and matching. But I think that Grimmel at least has enough differences to not be considered a copy and paste character.
I would agree that they wouldn't have just made a copy and paste. As soon as they realized there's going to be a new villain in the third film, they would have wanted to make something distinct enough from Drago to warrant introduction of the character. Otherwise, why have here at all? Although it's interesting about you were talking about motivation of Grimmel not being anything like Drago. But earlier in this podcast, we had this idea of, well, maybe Drago would have wanted to hunt Toothless down because Toothless is the new alpha. And technically what you suggested about, technically what we know about Grimmel hunting dragons could be, an alteration of the idea of Drago wanting to get Toothless. Of course, this is all wild speculation right here, though.
Oh, no, you're right. That's actually a very good point. It could have been, so actually, bring that up, that could have been, that could have been carried on into Drago's design, actually. How he used to be, quote-unquote, Grimmel, hunting Night Furies, because the cape that we always talk about, but we have no confirmation, could be a Night Fury cape, and that could have just been carried over into his
Wolf
design.
is annoyed now.
I know, he says he doesn't think it is, but I'm saying it could have been an original design where it used to be Night Fury, but they just said, oh, let's keep it because, for one, it covers his arm. Ooh, big reveal. And two, it makes him look like a badass, which, it does. But, yeah, so I agree. And one thing I guess that I should have pointed out the obvious, Grimmel and Drago both use dragons as a means to an end to get what they want. So,
Dragons plus army.
Yeah,
even.
There you go. Exactly.
Well, once again, you guys took the one point I wanted to make, and you already said it, so...
That's why you don't let us go first.
Well, lesson learned about 2 years later. But you know what? Even though you mentioned the entire Drago want to go after Toothless in the first place, but now because Grimmel's here instead, so we just want to get the Night Furies because he got all of them. Yeah, thought about it all. But here's the thing. No one brought this up before. I have this one thing. You remember in the trailer there's this awesome shot of Hiccup Batmaning Grimmel? Remember that shot? Let's be honest. If he tried to do that to Drago, he probably wouldn't flinch because Drago is way too big for this. So in order for that shot to work, you needed a smaller villain. So there you go. That's the one reason we got it switched from Drago to Grimmel. There you go. Nobody made this. I made this point. Small victory.
And another thing that I think is, they've talked about how they wanted Hiccup's final enemy to be an intelligent enemy. I do think that Drago has a lot more intelligence and thoughtfulness than most people give him credit for. He's not just a brute. But I do expect that we're going to see a difference between Drago and Grimmel as versus how they go about the process of working against Hiccup. And Grimmel's going to be a little bit more, a more thoughtful, minded approach. We'll see instead, I guess. Sort of Figo-esque, to give the comparison.
Yeah. Actually, now that's actually a good question. Do you think, how much do you think of a Vigo Grimmel is going to be? I want to say not much, because then what's the point? But it does sound like they're going in that direction. So
I think it's just a natural product of when you decide to create a character that hunts Night Furies, which is a pretty easy motivation to go with for this franchise, and then combine it with sort of a smarter character. And a smarter character for a final villain for Hiccup just makes sense. Is, Hiccup has to combat somebody in the area that he's good at too. Thinking outside of the box, using his Hiccup is a combination of very intuitive but also very impulsive but also very smart. But so basically combating somebody where Hiccup has his strengths as well. That's a natural final enemy. So I think that Grimmel's composition, at least what we know of him, is just the natural onset of what makes sense for a final villain, as versus intentionally being like Figo.
Yeah, it's
the words right out of
something
my
you'll
mouth.
see in a lot of villains, right? In any major shows you watch, they'll have a somewhat similar progression of villains, unless they're doing something very different in terms of villains and all of it. You'll see your villains go from fairly low level to very, and not to say that those beginning villains aren't intelligent or good in and of their own right, but you will see like this progression of villain to where you have the villain being just as good as the hero, as you have the villain having all the same strengths that the hero does, and now the hero has to best them while they're still good at their own strengths.
That's a really good point.
So it's something you see in a lot of shows and in a lot of movies, as you see villains progress. So it's not unusual to see something like this.
And it's not
in
only
a final movie.
It's not only that you have to have something that complements the hero's strengths and weaknesses. You also have to have something that really challenges what the hero believes in. Now, we got a lot of that with Drago, but we're also getting. But let's just think about this from how the story actually goes. It's the story of a boy growing up, right? If we break it down to the basics, we look at the last movie. Let's be honest, it's about him, quote unquote, losing his best friend. So, like, you can say, oh, Drago, trying to enslave dragons for evil. That's definitely against Hiccup's views, and it is. But what's the one thing that Hiccup really cares for the most? I mean, sure, he'll take dragons, but he'll take Toothless over the dragons any day. And so when it threatens maybe not just dragons and Berk, but Toothless too, like majorly, and yes, Drago stole Toothless, but that was a side product of Drago just wanting all dragons. When it's like, it comes down to the quote, it's personal, because he wants just Toothless, right? He wants the Night Fury. That's where you get the whole, sure, he's smart and he challenges Hiccup in the smarts, but he's also doing something deeply, deeply personal.
It's interesting. So Drago wants all dragons, and as a subset, that means he's sort of interested in Toothless, whereas Grimmel is interested in Toothless, and as a subset is going to attack the dragons of Berk. So it's sort of a flip-flop there.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to look at it.
First and foremost, it's more, offending, I guess, to Hiccup.
But it challenges the hero more, right? It
Exactly.
means that they're more emotional at this point. So are they willing to forego some of their own morals and some of the own stances they might have took in the past? Are they willing to drop those because they're more emotional now? In the past, we might say, oh, Hiccup would never resort to violence anymore. He's past that. He's moved on from that, right? But has he, right? If it's such a personal, deep connection with Toothless that's being affected, would he drop that moral in order to protect Toothless.
You know, in a sense, I think Race to the Edge kind of did something with it. Like, he has a lot more fight scenes by himself when in Race to the Edge when it comes to and pretty much it comes to defend Toothless a lot of the time, or dragons in general.
So you could say that fighting for the dragons and Toothless and the dragons is all the same. But if we go back to the point of, I say, growing up, if he gets all dragons and Toothless is just, a subset of that, then Hiccup can just okay, I need to save Toothless in order to save everybody. But if Toothless is coming first and everybody else is getting in danger, Hiccup may have to let go of Toothless being important to him in order to save everybody else. And so I think that would be a huge growth moment. And I think that's why it is more important that, the order does matter.
It does, and that actually lines up pretty well with the log line and information that we've been seeing about the hidden world, where it is Hiccup. They've talked about Hiccup having to let Toothless go in some sort of a sense.
And as the entire, I think we mentioned this last week when they said that in the first movie he needs to kind of find equal ground with his father. In the second one, he needs to find equal ground with his mother. And in the third one, he needs to come to terms with himself. And what's the one thing that can tear Hiccup apart the most? Giving up Toothless.
Well, he also think that he needs to give up something in each movie. He gives up his ties to Vikings in the first movie, but then he gets him back. He gives up his dad, but he doesn't get him back. He gets his mom back, but what does he do in the third movie? What does he give up, and what does he get back? He gives up Toothless, and he gets back his ability to stand on his own. There's a simple word for that, but whatever. So, we'll find out.
We'll have to wait and see how this plays into the third movie eventually. But back on Drago's case, let's say he's in the movie in some way. How big do you think his role will be?
I'll go first on this one if you want.
Go ahead.
If he's in the movie in some way, there are two questions that you need to most certainly answer, right? At the very least, one major question that people will have, Drago had a huge armada, a huge army. What happened to that? And I think based on everything we've heard so far, it seems like they are answering that question fairly quickly, where that the army has kind of torn itself apart a little bit and has many different separate warlords who are leading different sections of it, and they're all attacking Berk for different reasons. The second question is Drago himself. What happens to him? And where does he go? What happened, essentially. People are going to want to see that in order to have some kind of closure from the second movie. You do have to give some kind of answer to that, even if it's just a one-off line from Grimmel saying he killed him. You need to give people something. In my opinion, I think the best, I wouldn't say the best, but as of right now, I think something they might do is, again, they might have had Grimmel kill him off screen in order to give Grimmel a more sense of permanence and say, okay, Drago was really bad, but apparently this guy's even worse. He was able to kill Drago. It would definitely lend more credence to Grimmel as a villain and definitely set him up as, okay, he's worse than Drago, potentially.
You know what? Making him more threatening would probably killing Drago on screen would actually be a lot more effective.
Yeah, even just do a really, a 1 minute flashback.
That's something I was going to say as well, yeah.
Yeah. Sort of like they had, Stoich's flashback of Drago, do something quick between Grimmel and Drago.
Yeah, that could work. Wolf, do you have anything else to say? Or...
Not really.
Okay. So I'll say this just in case someone would actually steal this from me. I'm not sure about this, but I'm going next. Here's what I think. For the first time in the How to Train a Dragon franchise, a post-credit scene Okay, the entire movie is over. Every happy ending, sad ending. We all cried probably. The credits end. Then we cut to an icy location. We see the bewildered beast rising from the ocean, putting Drago on an icicle, and he goes, "Oh, you finally found a place to put me in. I couldn't hold my breath for much longer." And then he sees the bewildered beast running away, and he's like, "Wait, what are you doing? Come back here, come back!" And the bewildered beast doesn't come back, and he says, "Come back!" And he just started screaming in order to get his attention, and cut to black. There you go.
So you're doing, I think it's an Ice Age 2 reference?
Is it?
Either Ice Age 2 or Ice Age 3 with the squirrel being trapped on an island.
It's the very end of the second movie, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember it being in any Ice Age movie, but this wasn't the intent. I'll tell you that much.
I was wondering if someone would bring that up, though, right? Because it also lends credence to, will they do a fourth movie now that DreamWorks is owned by a different, now that DreamWorks is owned by another company, will they do more How to Train Your Dragon movies since, How to Train Your Dragon is profitable? And one way you could do a fourth movie is to have Drago go on to be in a fourth movie that doesn't reflect back on our main cast. And that's where you could give Drago his either more nuanced story or his redemption story even.
Okay, one thing I will say that's not necessarily as jokey as the post-credit scene idea.
I'm taking it more serious.
Yeah, not really much to say on that because, again, we talked about it last week that apparently the people who hired Grimmel in this movie are Drago's old soldiers. Mm-hmm. So there's that bit of connection there, and we'll get into what we think the bigger connection is later on. But, at the end of the day, if we have a big bad, then we have that small of a connection that the army just wants to continue their master's old job, and they just pay another person to do it. That's really all we really need, if you ask me. Yeah, Drago's army got somebody else to follow after Drago's defeat. There you go.
I don't think it's so much that they want to continue his old job, right? They're an army. They only followed him because they feared him more than likely. They didn't follow him because some of them probably followed him because they wanted to, but I would say there were also many of them followed him because, again, they were afraid of him. And so I don't think it's so much they hired Grimmel because they want to complete Drago's goal and achieve his ambition, but more so because Hiccup is a threat and they want to deal with him. And if there's a guy out there who specifically hunts Night Furies and is really, really good at it, then why not hire the best to get rid of a threat? So then you can go on to attack Berk, take all the dragons from there, and continue to use them to do whatever you want.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Sure.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, so I'm done. Who's going next?
Well, so honestly, I kind of already said my little piece about at the very beginning. Of course, it was a very minor prediction. If Drago was back, it would show that I think that it would have been Grimmel. This is one of my lowest prediction, that Grimmel would have been the one who killed his family through collateral damage while hunting a dragon. But Drago thought it was a dragon, yada, yada, yada. So Drago, and now building on it, because I can get to that point, Drago doesn't really believe in Hiccup, but he still helps him take down Grimmel because he realizes it was Grimmel who took him down, his family, from him, not just dragons. And so you don't get a redemption arc necessarily, but he realizes, my whole motivations were wrong, sort of things. And then if you've seen Troll Hunters, he pulls an Angor Rot, he sacrifices himself. That was a great series.
Anyway. I understood that reference now because I saw the show finally.
Okay, Captain America. Anyway, do you get that reference? No.
No.
No. Okay.
I'm kidding.
Okay,
Obviously, I know.
Excuse me.
We did an outcast about Infinity War. I have to get that reference.
That's very true. He does. But yeah, so I think that's kind of the short version of it, and I really can't expand it more because I don't think, like, after I heard that, Drago wasn't gonna be in it more anymore, and then it also kind of pairs with the now we know more about the plot, so it's kind of like I can't really merge what I originally thought, which you can go back to the episode and figure that out, what I originally thought was gonna happen, to what's happening now. Like, I just couldn't find any real way to factor him in to that fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Haddock, your turn.
All right, so you've seen me talking about this obviously on my blog recently. For me, the big thing is that you have to insert in Drago enough that you answer the question from the end of the second film. And we've already talked about this. It's the fact that Drago retreats from Berk. It's not that he dies. He loses a battle. That doesn't mean he's lost the war. He still has that enormous bewilder beast. We have to answer both what happened to Drago and his dragon. So, that needs to be addressed in some capacity. Otherwise, we have a very large gaping plot hole at the end of the second film. But beyond that, it really is up in the air for how much Drago is or isn't present. And I'm with you guys leaning towards the minimal Drago anymore. Technically, you could adeptly integrate Drago in a variety of ways, even having him be more integrated and butting heads with Grimmel, however the relationship plays out. But personally, for me, I think that in addition to all the points that you guys have mentioned, that it would actually be pretty imbalanced if Drago were in a lot of How to Train Your Dragon 3. So, if they had a lot of time dedicated to him, it'd feel like the first film is in its own little world, The Problem's the Red Death, and then the other two films are a different cluster that's intertwined about Drago. And that's a very imbalanced way to write a trilogy. So everything's a lot more balanced if you have a unique conflict per film. Red Death, Drago, Grimmel. But I don't think that's not to say that Grimmel doesn't arise out of what's happened with Drago. So I think that in order to transition into Grimmel and what Grimmel's motivations are and where Grimmel's power comes from, we're going to have to answer what goes down with Drago, which means we're going to get at least some references to Drago and what happened with him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, it's standard storytelling for movies as well. It's like people will go into the third film expecting to see something from Drago, even if it's just a flashback from someone or passing reference and mention. You do need to give your audience something because they will be expecting it because, again, we didn't see him die on screen. We saw him retreat.
Exactly. And the writers are not so inattentive that they would forget about that.
Agreed.
Okay. Now a bit of a behind the scenes. As I'm typing this script and I'm getting to this point, I suddenly realized something. We talk about Drago being a bit in the movie, maybe having a supporting role, or maybe just not showing up at all. And then I suddenly realized, if he just disappears, and that makes the entire build-up of Race to the Edge and How to Train a Dragon 2 seem like it led to pretty much nothing, right? And no. I'm looking at this through. Imagine if you're a newcomer to the franchise, and you are trying to go over it in a chronological order, like movie one, the short films, then the seasons of the TV show, and then the second movie. So you have this entire, I don't want to conquer the world as opposed to some people. Some buyer from the north wants to buy something, all this, and then at the end of Race to the Edge, you see this guy killing Krogan and says, "I'll find another King of Dragons." And then in the second movie, you see the flashback and everything, and so all of this, and it leads to nothing. that's kinda, and I just came to this conclusion that that's kinda okay. Sure, whatever. What do you guys think about this?
I
No.
think it's an interesting way for you to frame it that way because for me, the battles in the second movie themselves are already a payout for the lead-in. Is the fact that you have all of Drago's motivations, his looming threat as a power force that ends up being realized in the final battle of Berk, where Hiccup has to stop him at his home.
Mhm.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You still get that emotional payoff. You still get that moral payoff, and you get to have
Oh, no,
learn that
don't get me
lesson
wrong.
and see that
He
lesson.
lives
Right?
up to he lives up to the hype, but it's like after he's done, after he's beaten, war or battle doesn't matter. After that sounds like a song line now that I said it, but at the end of the day, after Hiccup beats him, it's like, okay, I'm done, bye. And it's
Yeah.
and then he's not mentioned again. So
Once
why did he
defeated,
go through
twice
all this?
shy.
That would be weird, and that's why they have to address Drago in the hidden world.
I mean,
Otherwise,
Yeah.
have a
It would be-
whatever.
It would be weird, certainly, but it doesn't negate what they've done with him, right? It's still there, and it's still good. It's just, I guess you would say there's no payoff for Drago, but at the same time, at least there is a payoff there for Hiccup. And at the end of the day, is that what matters most?
Yeah, that's
right?
what's matter. Yeah.
Or
That's
does that
true.
matter? Or does that matter enough to negate that just that plot hole potentially?
Well, yeah, you gotta think like, I mean, it's not like I feel like people would think there's so much more you could do with Drago, but there's kind of not. I mean, if they explain at least what happens, because as Will said, explains what happens to his army, then what else can there be with Drago? It's like you should at least, I'm with Haddock, you should at least reference him in some way, saying like Grimmel, here's the idea, right, for me that I just thought of because I'm so smart, not really, but Grimmel's like, or is like, so you're just like Drago, and Grimmel's like, oh, that spare, I don't know, he uses a different word. It's like, he washed up on my shore and I killed him a week ago. I don't know, you got to be more elegant than that, right? But if you reference him in something like that, that would be a way to do. I think that would be a better way for it to at least end his story.
You don't even need to spend that much time with Drago in order to wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be a little bit more elegant than just like a one-line mention, because otherwise people will feel rather dissatisfied about waiting 5 years to know what happened about Drago and have it pushed away with a single sentence. But at the same time, the hidden world only has so much screen time. They're dealing with a whole lot of different plot arcs and things that need to be resolved. They have to budget their time accordingly, and there's not going to be much time budgeting for the villain of the second film if we're transitioning to somebody completely different in the third.
Mm-hmm. Yep, agreed.
Fair enough.
Okay, so one last thing about this entire thing. We may have talked about this before, but in a much smaller form. But do you think Drago and Grimmel have some connection to each other? Partners, maybe family? What do you think? And since Wolf and I were in the discussion the previous time, Haddock and Rush get first dibs. What do you guys think?
I'm fine going first again, or Rush. If you have something you're rushing to say, go right ahead.
That was good.
Sounds like he's rushing.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's rushing to get out of here.
For those of you who don't know, since obviously this is audio recording, I left the call because I honestly don't even know why I keep my name. Like, it was a nice nod to the album, but I can just change it. Of course, I have several other really stupid names that I could change too that I find absolutely hilarious, but nobody else does. Either way, I'll just keep it Rush for the pure fact that everybody calls me Rush. So, I guess I'll go first. because
I mean, I can't
I'm
say anything. My
playing-
name is Wolf.
Yeah, but it's not like people make a joke based off your name constantly. Are you gonna wolf it down? Haha, no. Yeah.
I'm so glad my name has no pun abilities, as far as I'm aware.
It reflects your actual ability to joke.
Oof.
I'm sorry.
Whatever you
I had to
say.
bring the focus off of me. Okay. So, great. I already forgot the question.
Do you think to each other, partners, family,
Ah,
whatever?
yes. I think they have no relation in terms of familial. For one, so How to Train the Dragon was actually pretty good about how they stylized their characters. Like Drago was looking of a Slavic descent, like a Russian or Slavic descent, while Grimmel looks like he's more Irish, if you ask me. At least his facial scheme, and his hair patterning. That's a weird word to say. Anyway, but so nothing familial. Business, it's possible that, but like just to demote. So Drago seemed like he was the big bad in terms of business. Like he paid everybody to hunt dragons for him. So it'd kind of be weird to have. So for one, another person who sells to Drago, but also is smart. Like so, we had Vigo who sold to Drago and was super smart, but then we also have Grimmel who's allegedly smart and also sells to Drago. So I think it'd be weird to do that again. Not saying that people who go to the movie have seen the TV show, so they won't know. Hey, they won't know that it's a carbon copy of Vigo, but you never know. So I don't think it's gonna be that. But what I do think is there'll have at some point been some interaction at a acquaintance level when they were starting out. So like, let's just say this: Drago just lost his family because one, Grimmel looks pretty old, right? So maybe Drago actually worked under Grimmel as a dragon hunter before he became. I wasn't gonna say crazy because he's probably always been crazy.
Before he went independent. Let's go and let's
yeah,
see what
before he
this-
went independent. If the dragons didn't kill his family, Drago probably would have. He crazy. But yeah, so I feel like Drago may have worked under Grimmel at some point, based on the age
Okay.
look.
That's an interesting idea.
That is interesting. One fan theory that I've seen running around that I've really enjoyed has been sort of the opposite of that. Is that Grimmel was a subordinate of Drago, and when Drago sort of lost control of his forces in the second movie, Grimmel took over. I've seen that theory, and I think there's something slightly compelling in the idea of them being related a little in that aspect. Also because it transitions from Drago to Grimmel pretty naturally, and it explains why Grimmel seems to have ships with the same, well, as we know, it's a lot of the same stuff that Drago had.
Okay. Wolf, what about you? Remind me what you said because I forgot.
It's been a while. I don't even remember myself, so I'll just say something entirely new, perhaps. Maybe it's the same thing. I don't know. You can listen to that episode of the Berkcast and this one to find out. But I'll say that personally, I don't think I'd want them to have any connection. Personally, I think I would be perfectly fine if they were completely separate entities within this world, and they both have always done their own thing separately, and I don't see one really working for the other in any capacity as of now. Maybe as we learn more about Grimmel, that might change, but as of now, I definitely couldn't see Drago working for someone else. And the way Grimmel seems to come off in the trailer, at least, I don't think I could really see him working under someone.
That is a very fair thing. Grimmel's personality does not reek of being second to anybody.
Well, that's actually, come to think about it, this is really the one point for all villains in this franchise. Like when you put two of them together, they don't get along, and one has a superiority complex over the other. So that's kind of a recurring thing. Now that I think
Except for
about it.
Bildu.
Well, he doesn't count because he sucks.
Best villain of the entire franchise.
Don't you dare.
I refer you to the GIF I just posted in the server. But here's what
We all know Fungus is the best.
This is true.
well, actually we know.
Mastermind of it all.
You know something? Best plot twist ever. Seeing how he has white hair. Grimmel is actually Mildew as an alter ego.
No.
That's his superhero alter ego or something. That will be the best twist ever. Okay, but jokes aside, when I brought up to someone, I don't remember who it was. It wasn't a part of the Berkcast, I can guarantee you that much. But I brought this idea to someone, and they said, but Drago says that they may be related to family, and they told me, but Drago said he saw his family taken away from him. And I'm like, yeah, but then again, it's the same franchise where a person saw his wife get abducted by a dragon and she ended up being okay. So, you know, it's not that far off. It's the idea of him having a family member that survived is not that far-fetched, honestly. True, he may not be his family member, and to be honest, I don't prefer this kind of direction to the story myself, because I don't know. Seeing what Grimmel looks like, seeing how he talks, I don't know. Nothing fits to me with them being family.
No.
But partners, you know, I can see them maybe. You know, they keep saying that is like more up north than whenever he's mentioned, like I said, Vigo mentioned is a customer from the north and everything. So maybe they just rule different parts of the archipelago, like Drago's in the north and Grimmel is more to the south of everything.
It seems like
So-
Drago's HQ was in a very icy location, so
Well, you know, the ice could be the big well.
For those of you who desperately want your familial connection, right? And for your Star Wars reference for this Berkcast,
oh god.
Grimmel
It's
is
his father.
Oh god, here we
uncle,
go.
not his father's uncle. That way, you can have your familial connection.
Actually, you
It
know,
explains why Grimmel was able to be in Hiccup's house and they were having that conversation. And you have your Star Wars reference.
I was
Because
gonna
Hiccup
say
can go, no.
actually, you know something? Yeah, someone actually brought up that Valka may fall Grimmel. Somebody actually said it. I don't remember who, but somebody mentioned it.
I was gonna say that Grimmel was Drago's father because he cut off Drago's arm. That's even more of a Star Wars reference.
But
Yeah.
Drago's not the hero, though. Unless he actually is,
Well-
and Hiccup is the villain.
But here's the thing: Drago, design-wise, reminds a lot of. Is kind of similar to Alvin from the show. Alvin is voiced by Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker. It all makes sense.
Checkmate.
Everything's connected now. Everything's connected.
So you're saying we're gonna get lightsabers in the final film? That's totally how we're defeating the villains.
Well, you know.
We have
Fel
light furies.
knows
it's only one step up, just a
Saber,
lightsaber.
And those Light Furies do have hyperdrive. We've already established this.
It's true.
Perfect. There we go.
Well, and you know, Cloud Jump, Alwyn, like we said.
And General
so-
Hoff will say it's a trap.
Not our wing,
Well,
X-Wing. Let's get Star
X-Wing.
Wars lore right here.
okay.
We don't need Star Wars fans mad at us. They are rabid.
Well, luckily we're a How to Train Your Dragon, not a Star Wars podcast, because otherwise I wouldn't be here, like, at all. nothing against Star Wars. I'm just not that I'm familiar with the law, not to extreme length.
Kick HC of Berkcast or ban HC of Berkcast?
Hey, I created this damn thing. Ben. Okay. Actually, so where were we on this? Okay, so
Familiar.
just to close this. I don't think they're family related, but partners. I can maybe see them as far off, but they are aware of each other. They may have come across each other in the past, but at the same time, I don't think they are best friends forever or something.
Like the type of people that have best friends.
No. I feel like if anything, Drago and Grimmel in the same room would butt heads pretty badly. I can't imagine them being very friendly with each other at all.
For some reason, I really want to see them play Mario Party or something together. That would be amazing. Grimmel, I won. Drago, oh.
Drago and Grimmel are the SpongeBob and Plankton of the How to Train Your Dragon world.
SpongeBob and Plankton?
Yeah, SpongeBob and Plankton. They have that episode where they become friends for a bit.
Now I just want to see them. That stupid.
So you're
fun
saying
song.
that Drago doesn't scream, he actually just does SpongeBob laugh really fast and really loud. It's not da, it's ah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
F is for friends that do stuff together. For you and me, N is for Night Furies. We kill them all, and you figure out the rest.
Have fun figuring that one out. I will applaud anyone who manages to translate that song over to How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, well, I gave them one. N is for Night.
F is for flying through all the clouds. U is for upside down. N is for Night Furies flying all around. All out here in the Berk Archipelago.
Well done.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Can we top that? Do we have anything that can possibly top comparing Drago and Grimmel to SpongeBob and Plankton?
I do not think so.
And that is a great way to end the show.
So that's all for this Berkcast. We hope you enjoyed. What do you think Drago's role would be in How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World? How big will that role be? You can tell us all about that in the comment section below. On Tumblr, where we are now Berkcast Team. On Twitter, we are Berkcast with a capital B, capital C. And you can find us all on the Berk forums and the How to Train Your Dragon Discord. Haddock, thank you for joining us. Where can the listeners find you?
Thank you so much. I always enjoy being on here, and it was a really interesting discussion this time. So thank you so much.
And be honest, where else can you see a group of people comparing How to Train Your Dragon to SpongeBob SquarePants of all things?
See, this is exactly the sorts of reasons why I like to be a guest here, is because these conversations happen. Life is just so much better when you make the weird connections. So much better.
Well, I'm glad we aim to please on that. But anyway, where can people find you?
People can find me on Tumblr at kingofthewilderwest.tumblr.com. It's spelled all in one single word, no spaces, no underlines, anything. King of the Wilder West, or Wilder spelled Wilder. So King of the Wilder West, if that makes it easier for you to find me.
And if you want it really easy, it will be linked in the bottom of the video.
Yeah.
Well, that works.
Yeah, and you also probably read it on Tumblr once we'll post it. You will retweet it, right?
I'll be reblogging it for sure on Tumblr.
Yeah. Okay, so with all that said, thank you for listening. I was HC.
I was Rush.
And I was Wolf.
And I was Haddock.
And we'll see you all next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.